Hey guys, how is it going? My name is Jordan Pacheco.
And I'm Rudy Carlos.
Thank you so much for tuning in, not only to the Glad Trad podcast, but this is a patrons only. So if you are watching or listening to this, congratulations. You give us money to survive every month. God rewards you. Everyone tries to like hide and be cute with it. They're like, oh my gosh, well, thank you so much for supporting us, which we really do appreciate. It's nice because we've been able to, so far, this means the podcast, by the way, for our patrons is self-sustaining. So besides your prayers, your financial support has had it so that Rudy and I can purchase more hours of space for all of our little parts. Because if you'll notice, sometimes on our audio side, with our hosting platform, there's some stuff we always post to YouTube, and then we can have to be a little more selective on the stuff that we post just kind of in the general podcast world. So we're really, really grateful for you guys to do this. And as a promise, one of the things that you can do if you are a Chad Monarchist is you can suggest episode topics. I know, right? You love that. I should give the other ones, we should give the other ones like really, really cool names. But I have an idea for the name of our people, Rudy. What do you think about the Skizzies?
The Skizzies! If you guys didn't know this, you are now a schismatic.
Yeah, it's all a matter of time before we are all dragged into a papal dungeon and shot. With a simple desire of loving the Catholic faith. Can't do that today. No.
It's run by Jesuits. So,
gosh, not even good Jesuits. So today's topic is actually a really, really good one. This comes from Jason Yoakam. Thank you so much for being a Chad Monarchist, Jason.
Thanks,
and
Jason.
I wanted to give just kind of a rundown of it. So Jason, he talks about how, he's gone with friends and he's seen how Protestants do community. He sees how, he has friends who go to a home-based megachurch and how they seem to have community down. They seem to be representing a lot of the fruits maybe even seen in the early church. Just talking about how they do a lot of Bible study and how, let's go on here, there's Bible study and there's fellowship, and he doesn't seem to find that a lot of Catholic fellowship in his current parish situation. He currently attends a Latin Mass, and he wants to know if how to kind of pragmatically build authentic Catholic community and what that might look like. One thing that he really likes to talk about in his conversation is community organizing, or especially around that Catholic sort of identity. And, he's just kind of he knows that, of course, like with his friend's church, with the Protestants, it's theologically not correct. Incorrect is what I'm trying to say. But as he says they meet weekly at someone's house to study the Bible. They aim to nourish each other spiritually. They challenge each other to be better. They go on trips together. Everyone in the church is essentially a mentor who is helping to guide them. I can't help but feel that they really have the right idea in terms of Christian fellowship. Honestly, it even seems to more closely resemble the type of community of the Apostolic Fathers. Ooh. They are very, very incorrect theologically, but they really nail the community building. This also helps them in their evangelization. It's so easy for them to invite a non-believer to a Bible study at a friend's house when they're going to play board games after. So yeah, thank you, Jason, so much for that suggestion on building an authentic Catholic community. We talked about this a little bit, Rudy, in an early episode of ours called Catholic Camaraderie. Do you remember any part of that?
I do remember. Yeah, that was one of our first episodes back when we were still just doing audio only.
We were both just engaged. I just become engaged and you were still
That's
engaged.
True. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I do remember that episode. It was funny. You guys don't have a vision of this, but just imagine this in your head, okay? Jordan lived in Burbank.
Yep.
So I would drive there, and then we would sit on the couch, and we had this little like Zoom recorder that was like on a tripod, and we would just kind of like try to like carefully like crank our neck to make sure that we had the optimal audio. Those good times.
Now, I'll tell you this. Now, I will say this, though. The audio quality back then sounds good. And the reason why is because we would throw these blankets and everything in my living room.
Yeah.
And the couch was a huge...
Unplug the fridge.
Yeah. Okay, we would unplug the fridge. Wow,
Yeah.
Look at us. We bougie now, right?
Yep.
So maybe it'd be good before we kind of maybe address more of the pragmatic tips. Rudy, I know that back in the old days, back in the Novus Ordo days, when I met Rudy was actually in charge of our young adult group at the Novus Ordo parish we both went to. So, I mean, obviously you can speak to it more than I can just on that community organization element, because you did a little more of that.
Yeah, I can. And I can tell you, Jason, that trying to wrangle people together in the Novus Ordo, I don't know if it's the same in the traditional world, because I didn't take up that opportunity, or didn't really look for it. Partly because I don't have time to do that anymore, but also just because I don't feel it was necessary in our parish. But I can tell you that in the Novus Ordo world, it was really hard to wrangle people to actually make it to the events. And I wonder if that's something that you might be encountering at your parish, but I'm not I'm not entirely certain. But I can tell you that the events that you are seeing um, going on at your Protestant friends' church are the kinds of things that are wholesome and welcome in any kind of parish. What it takes to build that, I think, is to have enough people that are, number one, similar in age and have the same sort of interests. So I'm not sure if that's maybe something that you've explored there yet, but when I was planning events, I would center them around firstly fellowship, but also incorporate elements of the faith in there. I had to like look at what our community looked like, and the young adults there, a lot of them didn't have a good formation. So we would try and add things like, okay, well, we're going to have a small talk on this particular topic, and then afterwards we're just going to hang out, ask some questions, talk about the topic, and then we would go out and get dinner or something like that. And most of the events we would plan around food, because food is, when you sit down and yeah, it's a great unifier. You sit down at a table and it's just like, how can you not feel like you're with your family there?
Is this something that's just more inherently built into Protestantism than Catholicism? Because I mean, you know how it's like wrangling cats and Catholics, but it seems to me like, yeah, there seems to be more of a, generally, I should say, because I don't think it's just something that's devoid in Catholicism. But it does seem like, when you think about like the evangelical Protestant, there is that like, hey, like come to a Bible study. Jen just got invited to a Bible study by a coworker. Like, oh, we're just gonna get food afterwards. We're just gonna hang out. Like, is there just like a difference? Maybe not theologically, but just like in terms of how the design is of the denomination that encourages that, you think? Or is it just the Catholics just aren't good at that stuff just for the heck of it? I mean, not for lack of trying, because obviously you did.
So. Yeah, I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that Catholics aren't good at it. I would frame it as Protestants do it better. Because I'm tempted to say that it's a bigger element in the Protestant denominations because
they have to.
Maybe because they have to, maybe because they don't have I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I can even elaborate on that. It just, like, why is it that Protestants do it better?
Look at it this way, maybe. So it's like, we say this, like, Catholics should not touch guitar masses,
right?
And anything hippy-dippy. Also, because if we try to, when we try to like infuse those Protestant elements, they outshine us just objectively. The perfect example I can think of is screens in mass. You ever seen how like all these parishes now, they think like, oh my gosh, right? It's like, well, if I'm gonna have screens, the little independent evangelically church down the road has a whole light show and stuff. So it's not just to help us sing to the mountains.
They have a really good slideshow.
They have a really good slide. All right. These are today's announcements. I think that for Catholics, like our life is centered around the liturgy, and because that should be the most important thing, I think that obviously maybe it makes more sense for a good or a well-oriented parish to spend more of its time and energy on the liturgy. And that community should organically spring from the liturgy, which I think we could probably get into. But I think for Protestants, like, part of that is the fact that as a Protestant, you're a lot more modular. Like, a Catholic will always go to a Catholic church. He just decides he goes to this one down the road, or he drives 2 hours to Latin Mass or whatever. Oh, well, he used to drive 2 hours to Latin Mass, let's say. Hey. But for a Protestant, maybe it's like, you know, you have Baptists and Pentecostals and evangelicals and Lutherans and all these people competing. But I've noticed with like a lot of, especially Protestant converts, there's a lot more modularity in where they started versus where they ended. Like,
Yeah. You know what? I think you just hit the nail on the head. We had mentioned before we started filming that there's a lot more shopping around as a Protestant, right?
Yeah.
So the I think I'm using this correctly. The onus is on the Protestant church to create all of these different events that are going to allure more people to stay. They're focusing more on a retention of the people that go there. In addition to the you know, whatever sort of for lack of a better word, liturgy that they have.
Yeah. Well, it's not, that's the thing. It's like, it's worship instead of liturgy. And so as a result, like the focus is, where on the Catholic world, it's just about the liturgy. So that's why the Latin Mass is so wonderful, because ad orientum means you shouldn't care what priest is saying the Mass. Like, this is the Mass, and we go to the Mass. And if a Catholic, if a parish is doing the Latin Mass or any Mass well, then it should feel like a Catholic is home no matter where he is. It seems to me like Protestants have to kind of, it's much more humanistic, right? It's about the pastor and the music and the lights. And that doesn't mean that like the sense of community is just humanistic and therefore bad. But I think that there just makes more sense. Like, you want to push people to emphasize like retention's good, especially if you pull in like salvation of souls, all this other kind of stuff. It makes sense that there's like a lot more outreach in that, which is actually kind of a shame, because it seems to me like Catholics, this is like a book in some cases I think Catholics could really take from, because we both know it, like going to a new parish or something, and like it's the Mass and you feel home, but also like what steps do you actually take to learn about your brother next to you or something like that.
Yeah. And you know, in most Catholic churches, I think the extent of fellowship tends to be what, like Jason mentioned, where it's just kind of like donuts and coffee after Mass, and an opportunity to, you know, socialize with the people in passing. But one of the cool things that you can encounter, or perhaps maybe God is asking you to start, is to find people that are in your age group and just meet up. Like when we were doing the young adult group at St. Vitus, a lot of the events were pretty innocuous. Like there were liturgical feasts, or, you know, here at our parish, there's a really wonderful family that hosts a lot of the social events at their house, because they have a really nice house and it's pretty spacious and they can have a lot of people over. And so a lot of our fellowship in the young adult group has been around, you know, having food or a liturgical feast, or even at your former house.
The pool parties,
the pool parties that we would have for for like 4th of July and that sort of thing. So I think maybe God is calling you, if you're hungry for this, and I think everybody needs some fellowship, but to look around and see who is in your age group and just kind of like get together and do something.
Yeah. You know, I think that part of our mode as Catholics is, Mass comes from the Latin word missa, which means dismissal. And so it's to take, you know, it's almost funny because this is one of those very few things, one of the very few things in the Novus Ordo I've heard in the Novus Ordo that I was like, you know what, actually, like, I get it, Padre. It's like, look, you've received the sacrament and you see the grace, and now your duty as a Christian is to go out to the world with it. You know, you don't keep the faith under a bushel basket. And I'm like, okay, I get that. And so maybe part of it is like, especially with Latin Mass communities, because I think that there are some Novus Ordos that emphasize community a lot, and actually sometimes to a fault of their liturgy, right? You can pull up all the good portion of parishes in your area, and you might hear, well, we have we have women's Bible group and men's Bible group and Knights of Columbus, right? And we have altar and Rosary Society, and we have blah 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 blah. Look at all this community. Like, look at all these groups you can join. And then it becomes a whole other thing when it's like, okay, well, how do you actually get people to these groups? But there's this emphasis on, like, I've seen parishes where it's like, oh, we have 100 groups, and that includes like children's liturgy stuff, right? And it includes like all these other sorts of things, like ministry. But yeah, I think that the ministry notwithstanding, there is like a very genuine desire just to like have friendship and fellowship built around the faith, which is what we talked about in Catholic camaraderie a lot. You know, like at the end of the day, like since the faith is the most important thing, Aristotle talks about friendships being built upon the transcendent third. It makes a lot of sense if it is around a similarity amongst people such as religion. Yeah, I don't know. I think that Catholics, part of it also, especially for trads, this is one thing that I think we've seen very good examples of in our Latin Mass experiences, but we know that sometimes isn't always universal. We spend so much time personally just kind of fighting different directions to get to Latin Mass. It's hard to be vulnerable enough maybe sometimes with people on just like realizing that you're all kind of in this boat together. Like you're not just fighting against your family anymore about the Mass or your bishop or your priest or whatever, but like now you're all together naturally as a community. So it should make sense to like that should be prominent, you know?
I think also, sometimes I have a feeling that there's more people at this parish that want the same thing,
Yeah.
but they feel like they don't know how to make it work. And so there's probably a community of people there who want that sort of fellowship, but aren't really sure what to do.
Yeah.
I always say, I mean, I'm gonna stick to my guns and say that anything centered around food. I mean, that's why there's coffee and donuts, right? It's cheap, it's easy, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But what if you started hosting people at your house or
Right.
meet at a restaurant? I don't know what your restrictions are wherever you live, but here, they're like reimposing the mask mandate in LA for some reason. So
I heard your sheriff's not going to enforce it.
yeah, he's not going to enforce it, but they said that last time, and it ended up being they got third-party people to, go down the road and make you put your mask on and stuff like that. They give you tickets and stuff like that. So I don't know. It's frustrating for sure.
Yeah. So maybe this is like the thing too. Because he asks a little bit here, just to kind of really hit his questions maybe. So is it really donuts after Mass? Is it a monthly luncheon? How does it differ from the type of Protestant communities described? One thing I think is really good, and one thing that Vitus does, Carmel does, and this is something that comes from the top down, because I think a good parish ought to foster these, is there is Family Sunday, right? It's not just coffee and donuts, but like there is a genuine time when everybody and their kids after Mass go over to the park after St. Vitus Mass, and you literally are kind of forced to interact with your fellow parishioners because coincidentally, Rudy, you're all getting food together.
Yeah.
Yeah. For there's a reason why Christ instituted the Eucharist at the Last Supper. Food is as old as Catholicism itself, I guess.
In the last episode that I did, called Judge Not, I talked a little bit about the virtue of charity, and you see that sort of characteristic of charity in all kinds of different groups. You can even find it in a Protestant group. I think Protestants do a really good job of getting people to come with them, or inviting people, kind of being really charismatic in that sense, that they can pick somebody off the road and say, hey, would you like to come and learn about this thing called our faith, Christianity, that you want to talk about our Lord Jesus, that sort of thing. That's really cool. And that's like the ultimate charity that you can give somebody, is to unlock that part of their life that is the most important part, is for them to, like you mentioned, have not only fellowship, but fellowship within this group or these people, but also with that transcendent third, which is their blessed Lord and the Holy Trinity. Um, I think that in the traditional circles, this is still something that is really important, but we have lost our evangelistic zeal that we had in the early church to bring others into the church, to have interactions of the sort. And so I found it in my personal experience that I've had challenging moments where I did have the opportunity to invite people over and sort of spend time and kind of talk about things that well, opportunities to talk about the reason why we're so happy, why we love our blessed Lord, and that sort of thing. Um, and so in our traditional circles, we need to kind of reclaim that. We need to reclaim this sense of duty. I talk about duty a lot, but the sense of duty to form these relationships. And oftentimes, like I mentioned, it's a matter of having just one conversation. People are so shy, like I think also like depends on what state you're in. Like some people are more hospitable, right? Like if you go to like the South, everybody's really nice.
Right. That's a good point.
And they're like, hey,
yeah, it's built into the culture.
Really hang out. What are you doing here? Oh, you're from California, like that sort of thing. Charity is really important. Charity is going to bring all these people in, and charity urges us to bring these people in and to form these sorts of intimate relationships.
Okay.
I don't think mass is just a place for us to show up on the weekend or whenever we go and then not form a sense of community. Mm-hmm. And maybe it's not your responsibility. I wonder if you've talked to the pastor too, because that might be another good avenue to go down, is to actually talk to the pastor and say, just I would be very careful and tactful in the way that I bring it in, because some priests, they might take it a certain kind of way, like they might take it personally or something. Right. I don't know, just to be careful. Like I would just bring it up with tact and say, hey, I'm sort of looking for this sort of community, and I see this with my Protestant friends, but I'm wondering if maybe there's something that I can help you do in order to facilitate this sort of thing. So it could be anything like, you can announce it and I can try and organize something, like make sure that the tables are out, or that sort of thing. And it's practical, and it's something that that will grow organically over time.
Yeah, that's funny. I want to pick up on it because it's something that I'm reminded of is, we all know that the world owes us nothing. And so it sounds like your mom level of corniness, but the first step to fostering community is just to tell someone next to you, hi, how's it going? Because most people are not like, this is the funny thing about when you become a traditional Catholic. Do you remember your first Latin Mass where you've heard all these things about these rad trads? They're mean, they're judgmental, they're holier than thou, they're in their heads. And then as you go through the Mass, you may have just interesting curiosities. Well, heck, everybody kneels down and prays at the end of the Mass. Oh, don't they think they're pious? Like, what is this? Like, isn't that weird? And if you're not careful, you can develop a kind of stereotype that's completely unfounded and completely untrue. Turns out that trads are normal people. And they have families and hopes and fears and laughters and all that kind of stuff that, they don't tend to be mean. And so I think that like the first step is really just kind of finding someone you want to say hello to and saying hello to. Rudy, your thing about the pastor is so important. And what I've noticed in traditional circles is that, the priest is a lot more involved, I find, naturally in parish life, because it's a very top-down organization of the parish. Where, he, of course, like even in the Latin Mass, even in the fraternity, there are still parish councils and things to talk about. It's a much more centralized sort of circle. You don't have these like heads, these Susans, right, running all over the place. So I think that that's a great suggestion. Just being like, hey, I'm new here and I don't quite know where to go. At Our Lady Mount Carmel, one thing that's really cool is that the ushers tend to also be pretty welcoming sorts of people. And when Jen and I were new there, they very quickly were like, hey, how's it going? Like, hey, new faces, you know? And so joining something like ushering, right, which I think should really emphasize not just making sure people can go to the pews, making sure that the host is received reverently, making sure that the basket gets passed around, but also just making sure to say hello to people. I think that's extremely important. Um, you know, we are very fortunate because we've first off, I will say this, Rudy. One thing I did miss about when I went full trad, of course, is the young adult group at our Novus Ordo, because it really was fellowship. And I feel like for a lot of Catholics, maybe part of the issue is like if the liturgy is not, since that is like the source and reason that we're there. If you're at a liturgically dead parish, it's going to be harder to foster community because it's not going to be based around the faith, because the expression of the faith given to you is one of stale, right, and just beige Catholicism. So what I like about going to Latin Mass is when you discover like the truth of the faith and the fullness, you want to get it out there. It's the reason we have this podcast. You and I have invited people to Mass that we never used to invite to Mass. And I have a couple buddies, and like I'd say, like, yeah, come to Mass with me, this and this. But I'd be like, oh, yo, you got to check this out now. You don't know what you're missing. And so I feel like maybe for Latin Mass communities, as God willing, like they become, even with all these difficulties nowadays, they become more entrenched and they become flourishing. Right? They've doubled, they've tripled in size since COVID. This is such a good opportunity for a priest who's worth his salt, a pastor of a parish who's worth his salt, to really start facilitating events that really bring on an authentic Catholic community. Because once upon a time, the church was the center point of the village. So it was just kind of natural that you would do things all around the church because the town square was right outside. You know, you can see like the mayor's office not too far away. They had the shops and all that kind of stuff. Well, nowadays you really have to kind of drive to find the community as a Catholic.
Yeah.
But, you know, but that doesn't mean that we should, you know, kind of let go of our sensibilities about community, it seems.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That, you know, in the olden days, everything was centered around the parish life. I think it might have been smaller. Maybe that's the other ticket. But I think maybe you're not seeing this flourish because of COVID.
Mm.
You know, like people might still be afraid for some reason. They may not talk about it, but they avoid people just because that's sort of what the lifestyle has become. People just avoid. I know that like it didn't really affect us all that much because we a lot of us just kind of just kept meeting up. But
Right.
I do remember initially when I learned about COVID, I think maybe after the first lockdown, I didn't see people for about 2 or 3 months.
Yeah, I remember you didn't
I was,
see me.
yeah, you remember that. You remember that.
Yeah. Jen caught COVID and you guys
like,
were like, oh, we're going to die.
Yeah, you know, it's just like based
Yeah.
off of everything that was being told to us, we were like, no, I don't think this is good. And then eventually, you know, we started thinking, you know what? They are taking the mass away from us. They're taking away everything that we hold dear. We haven't seen our friends. We need to just kind of like throw care to the wind, you know, because we're losing a piece of ourselves here. And I wonder if that's maybe going on in your parish, that like people aren't doing events or something like that because maybe the pastor doesn't think it's prudent, or maybe people are just secretly afraid or maybe overtly afraid about this thing, which really isn't all that, you know, all that serious.
You know, I think that part of it too is that if we look at something you said earlier, if we look at Mass as just a thing that we do on Sundays, then yeah, like what's the point? But if we really look at it as like the source and summit of our life itself, and from the Mass flows everything else, then it makes sense that I start associating my friends more with the Mass. It makes sense that I start associating my extracurricular activities around the parish. You know, it's when you go to daily Mass, right, or you go to Mass during the week, it's funny because there's a sense of camaraderie naturally amongst daily Massers because there's not as many of y'all, and everyone's there, and it's like noon, and people are coming in from their jobs and stuff. But it's kind of nice. It's nice that like you're all there together to pray the Mass. For Catholics especially, like that sense of community, I think you're right. It's part of it is that we've drifted away from like the church being like the center hub, physically certainly, and of course spiritually. And I think that part of it coming back is that, yeah, that fostering of good parish communal life. So, Jason, when he asks like, what does authentic Catholic community look like? He asks about like organizations. Does this mean Knights of Columbus? Does this mean blah 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 blah? And for me, again, like I'll go back to this. Tomorrow, literally, my parish is having a dance for young adults. This is probably the smart. Cool. This is probably the smartest thing. Yeah.
It's great. It's perfect.
It's great. And it's easy, right? It's not rocket science. There's a little donation you give at the door. Someone sets up their speaker, like nice speakers with some swing dance music. People wear their dresses and their slacks, and they have a good time. And it's excellent. It's for Jen and I, like, we're married now, and this. Like, when you're married, like, you get married friends. Yeah. So that's gonna be kind of cool. Like, I've been thinking, especially when I get pregnant, like, wow, like we're gonna go into like the pregnant lady circles. And that's going to be kind of a new experience. That's going to be a new experience.
I'm already going through that now.
How is it? Give me some tips. Does everyone want to give you everything?
Well, yeah, that's the cool thing. The cool thing is that, people are really kind and generous with not only their baby clothing, but also, sharing their own experience. I think that's something that we have developed or cultivated between our friendship, is that, we've kind of done things staggered. So like I got married first, and then, we would talk about certain things, about what that looks like. You would go through a certain experience, and then I would ask about it, and sort of kind of get an idea, put some feelers out as to how to navigate a certain situation. Like, that's really cool.
Yeah.
And it reminds me also of, going back to Jason's question of what does an authentic community look like, a Catholic community. It reminds me of this thing. I don't know where I read it, but it's about parenting. It's about fathers and sons. And I think it was a study that was done that came to the conclusion that for a father and a son, the most effective way of actually sharing an experience is to be side by side and like kind of doing something together. That's sort of what an authentic Catholic community looks like, because if the community is wholeheartedly moving or desiring to move to a new spiritual height, to an intimate closeness with Christ, and you're all doing that together, you're all facing the same direction, right? And you're like on the same hiking trail, and you're going up to that summit, which is that knowledge, that intimacy, that union with God. Those are questions I think you have to ask yourself. Like, is the community doing this? And be objective as you can. Like, are we all like really moving towards the same direction? And if not, well, that gives you a little bit more information. Like, oh, maybe I need to look for a different community. But I think ultimately the first starting point to finding out is to talk with a pastor and just like bring these sorts of desires up to him, because maybe he knows something more than what we know.
Yeah, and what you said earlier, it's like, it's not just like kind of put it to the priest and expect something to happen, but like offer, if you can, like yourself as a resource to facilitate that. I think it's true, because a lot of times I think we kind of expect like these things already be in place in the church, right? And
yeah,
maybe God's calling you to be a witness to the community in that sort of unique way. Hey, I'm up for having a young adults group. Why don't we have a young adults group? Like, hey, like I noticed that we don't have We don't have like a teenage kind of group. I'd love to like lead that or talk about what that looks like. What, you know, with work with the priest, obviously.
Yeah.
Hey, like if you know if you're a young lady, like I'd love to have like a women's Bible study, and we can like have tea. You know, tea parties are very like, you know, your wife's been to some tea parties, Catholic tea
She's
parties.
hosted a couple, been to a couple. Yeah,
Very
they're
bougie,
fun
by the
for
way. Very bougie.
her.
You know, for us, I can't remember. You know, how many times did we'd get done having mass together, and then we'd like go over to the brewery or something.
Go to the brewery or
No.
we get some pancakes.
Uh-huh. We go get some breakfast. Yeah. And it
You
doesn't
know what's
have
a
to be
fun
big.
idea
Yeah.
too is like go to the range,
Yo.
like
Yeah.
just the guys,
Yeah.
just you
Just
and the
the
boys.
boys. Well, real quick, I just want to say, and that's also a really good way of inviting people. He talked about his Protestant friends and them inviting him. These are really, really good practical tips. Because again, like the first law of the church is the salvation of souls. We're not just doing these things like in place of that that's most important, but fellowship is important.
It
Christ
is important. Yeah.
Christ tells us where two or three are gathered, there I am in their midst. So we know that this needs to be a constant for us. And so yeah, if you just want to be like, hey dude, you know, me and the boys, you know, we're gonna go to mass, and then afterwards we're gonna go to the range. Would you like to come with us? You know, I mean, every Christmas or major feast day, Christmas, Easter, I put out a message on Facebook. Hey, does anyone want to go to mass with me? You know, like hit me up. Like I'll pick you up. I'll do whatever it takes. Like this is what I'm thinking, and you'll be surprised some of the feedback I've gotten from people. Really surprising.
When I first started doing these sorts of ministries, I talked about this in this other episode that we did with Nick Cavazos, who's a really cool. He's got a really cool podcast. Check it out. Subscribe to him. His podcast is called The Traditional Thomist. Really nice guy. Really cool guy. Uh, and I had talked to him in that episode about the different ministries that I was a part of, and I didn't go into full detail, but I was involved in the sacristan ministry, which I was the leader of, the young adult ministry. I was a catechism teacher. I was a Eucharistic minister, which again, I regret. And I was just really involved in the parish. And one of the things that I discovered and was a really common theme, and I think this actually translates to a traditional community, is that like 90% of the work is done by 5% of the people. Like
Mm-hmm.
these people like dedicate their whole life to like their free time to build these sorts of communities up. And I remember in the beginning, this is actually like the story that I want to tell you. I remember in the beginning feeling a sense of that God was calling me to be a priest, and I got involved in all of these different ministries because I wanted to see what I thought at that time a good priest would do. They would be involved in all kinds of these different aspects of the faith, right, or a parish. And I remember the first time that I taught a class, and my heart was just like thumping out of my chest because I was so nervous. I felt like I wanted to vomit because I was so nervous. And I thought to myself, like, did God really call me to do this? Because this is crazy. And I just don't feel like I'm equipped for it. I don't feel adequate for it. But over time, God gave me the grace that I needed at that particular moment in my life to teach a class, to be, a public speaker. 10 years ago, I would never have imagined being able to like even sit in front of a camera and like do a podcast with you. Like that would have just been
Too much.
like alien to me,
Yeah.
And I think for most people, it's the same experience. Going back to what I said earlier, maybe people want this, but they don't exactly know how to make it work, right? And like at that particular parish, it was really decentralized. Like almost everything was delegated to all the parishioners. So like the parishioners ran the church really at this Novus Ordo. And that's why I mentioned like it's good to ask the pastor, because in a traditional parish there's a sense of hierarchy. People look up to the priest delegates the responsibilities, not in a way that is like, okay, you guys do that part over there, you do whatever you want, but the priest has a particular vision for the parish, and he will delegate it in that particular way that he needs it. or that maybe he's done before and he didn't have the opportunity to do. Going back to COVID too, there's a big resurgence. I'm wondering if this is happening in your parish. There's a big resurgence in tradition because a lot of these parishes were the only ones that were open. And I'm wondering, because it's been a year of this whole craziness. A lot of the priests don't have time to do this sort of stuff, and I mean, look at St. Vitus. St. Vitus is the parish that we go to in Los Angeles. This is the first time in about a year and a couple of months that we're doing something social as a parish. Like this weekend is our second annual rib contest. That's exciting, but it's been a year that we haven't been able to do this sort of thing.
How'd you do in that, by the way, Rudy?
Last year, I didn't do very well at all. I had like two racks of ribs that I got. I didn't expect there to be a lot of people, right? And so I was like, oh, okay. I told the butcher, I said, cut those ribs in half so that I would have enough to give to the judges. And then it turns out there was like way more judges than, than I expected. I didn't have enough. And also it was supposed to be, you didn't know whose ribs they were. They just gave you a number.
Right.
And I confused the number. So I think I was 6, but then I said, oh yeah, these are ribs number 7. And I didn't win, but Ashley won the dessert contest.
She did. She killed that. Yeah. I'm getting extremely sentimental because I'd almost forgotten about that, but I can see your ribs out there. I can see myself tasting your ribs. They were fine, but I cast my vote where I cast my vote.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh man.
And now I got a rib of my own.
Hey, ooh, yo, me too, bro. Can I ever tell you that when I'd taken a line off you, do you remember what you said? Like when Ashley comes into a room, you're like, the rib approacheth.
It's a joke, people. I don't actually call her a rib. Come on.
Yeah, dude. Marriage is awesome. By the way, fun fact.
It really is, isn't
marriage
it?
Marriage is great. Marriage suits both of us.
You know what? And I think ultimately, like that's what, going back to authenticity, like I think a good parish prioritizes that. And that's why I think that dance is so cool, because it's a bunch of young adults. Yeah. It's really smart.
It's self-sustainingly genius.
Bunch of young adults. They're probably looking or discerning their prospects.
Right.
And hey, you go to a dance, you meet somebody, and it's not like at like a club or something where it's immodest or anything like that.
Yes, because the church needs to be the facilitator of good Catholic culture and marriage.
Yeah.
And family life. And if we don't get it from our parishes, and this is the big thing, it's like, we need to be able to volunteer our services. You're completely right about 5% of people doing 95% of the work. Now that I'm settling more into marriage, I feel like God's really kind of telling me to be an usher, because our ushers here, they have these like little earpieces.
Oh, you got an earpiece.
And the white gloves. Yeah, and I feel like I could probably concealed carry and be cool. So get down, Father. but genuinely,
Father, no.
But for choir at St. Vitus, I mean, I was pressed into service. Jeff literally walked past us and looked me and Johan, right, and he was like, "Hey, do you want to join the choir?" And that like yanked me. So I think that's
like
good.
the show, like what do they call those things? Like
the shepherd's crook.
Yeah, they have that in the show business, like the old timey, like, get off the stage.
No, but yeah, it's so important that we encourage our parishes to really be the cultural hub, especially right now. Again, I really recommend, if you haven't read Rod Dreyer's The Benedict Option, one thing in that book that it talks about is the fact that Christian communities are going to have to Christians are going to have to just rely on each other. Because we're living in a post-Christian world. So the secular society says, for young people, if you want to meet a young lady, you got to go to the club, right? You have to be willing to maybe compromise your morals or to see things that you shouldn't see or to do that. Obviously, it's not universal. But if we allow dating to be something that's done just on apps and in those sort of circumstances, then how can the church really honestly talk about preparing people authentically for marriage? dances, dinners. If we want to tell our children, and the church tells us that we should really enroll our children in good Catholic schools, then the church needs to be able to facilitate what it looks like to have a group for, new mothers and mothers at large and that sort of thing. And it doesn't have to be a big thing. Again, I think that having these like small groups, you don't need a bajillion ministries. If you have a women's Bible studies, a men's Bible studies, if you have an altar and rosary society, Knights of Columbus, St. Vincent de Paul Society, young adult group, I think young adult group's extremely important. Because, you and I both can attest to this. You more than I can, but relationships, romance can be really born out of that kind of thing again. And it's in the context of the faith.
Yeah, absolutely. That I think is authentic. You're all looking at the same direction. You all want the same thing. But yeah, you're absolutely right. These groups are there, and I hope that you have them at your parish. These groups are there for you to share a common interest, like the choir, for example, is a good place. I know a lot of people actually in choir who have developed close friendships out of that. And maybe it looks different than a Protestant circle because like those like intimate moments are more about, in between smaller groups and less about being in like a big setting with all the people kind of doing praise and worship or, that sort of thing.
Or like have like a small worship band or something.
Exactly. Yeah. I think it's more personal. I think that I've experienced that myself where, with things like you or even meeting Anthony, like I don't remember how we even started talking, Anthony and I, but Anthony's our other really good friend.
Mm-hmm.
And we met at the young adult group.
Yeah.
And, it was just like one opportunity led to another. And we just all started talking and having a good time. And a really awesome friendship blossomed out of that.
No. So, that's a crazy, I think that's just a ton of stuff, and Jason, one thing I wanted to impress about you and the rest of our audience as we kind of wind this down is that, the world for trads is wonderful and the world for Catholics is wonderful because obviously you can build community online. But online community, us included, is not a substitution at the end of the day for the real deal. We're creatures of interaction, and those interactions should not just be artificial or across a screen. So if you're feeling kind of discouraged where to go, and I was like this, I remember when we were at St. Victor's, I had this nervousness about me to say hello to people. Johan, one of our other good friends, actually said hi to me first, so which was really kind of nice, But having our own parish was uber helpful in just facilitating these sorts of things. But if you're feeling discouraged, really, just a real impress upon our entire audience. Like, I know that like the faith is the most important thing we can have, and sometimes we really want to guard it because we've had to really fight for it. It's hard to explain to family and friends why we love the Mass and we love the church the way that we do. It's hard. You are now amongst a group of like-minded people. And if you're not feeling like, oh my gosh, I don't feel welcome or whatever, well, again, talk to the pastor and also maybe try doing the first step. It's the rule in dating, right? Like maybe go out and say hello to the girl first. Like you'll be really surprised at discovering entire groups and subgroups that you didn't even know existed. And this is like the beauty of the faith. It's because we're all bonded together. As Rudy said, we're all facing the same direction. Hashtag ad orientem.
Is that not a plea for you, viewer? We have just gone through one of the most devastating events in church history. Just think about that for a second. I know it hasn't hit you yet. It's like somebody passing away. You haven't processed it yet. It's still the first day. This is devastating what has happened. If you don't know what we're talking about the revision to Summorum Pontificum, which is going to restrict the Latin Mass in a certain sense. But is this not a plea to go to the Latin Mass?
Yeah.
People, I think, oftentimes are afraid of the SSPX or any of these traditional societies that are like the fraternity, for example. More about the SSPX, but that's a different topic anyway. But this is your time to go and experience tradition.
Yeah.
there's a reason why it's being suppressed. You know, they want to suppress it because there's an authentic current there. The people are all oriented, like you said, ad oriented. Everybody's oriented to God, hopefully.
Yeah.
And you find Christ there, and you find people who are striving to enter into the narrow gate. This is the kind of community that can help save your soul.
Mm-hmm.
And I think of another friend too that I met. How did we meet? Oh, okay. I'll tell you another story, Jason.
Yo, story time with Uncle Rudy.
I met one of like the coolest guys I've ever met. Besides Jordan. Jordan's really cool. But you know what? I met this guy over this event that happened at the church, which was this guy called Leo Severino. He wrote a book. I think he's like a Catholic movie producer.
Yeah, he's a producer. Yeah.
Really cool guy, really nice guy. He wrote a book called Going Deeper, which is a really good book if you're looking for like an easy to grasp
intro to philosophy, theology.
Yeah, like reasons why God is real and that sort of thing. So he had a series of talks at our parish, and I went to most of them. It was kind of hard to do it because it was in the middle of the week, and long story, I have to drive a lot to get to work and back. So it was a lot of driving. I couldn't make it all the time. But it was a really interesting series in that it challenged us to think outside of the way that we typically think about God, or how do we explain God to those people who may not believe. And I remember one day I got this random message from like an unknown number, and it was this guy. He's asking a question about this talk, and I was like, what? Like, who is this person? I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. I have a sort of an idea of what you're talking about, but who is this? And it was that first text message that sparked this great friendship that I've had with this friend. His name is Shane. And
who's watching this coincidentally?
Yeah, he'll probably watch this. And Shane has been such a good friend where we bounce off ideas off of each other. We may not have this like super church, mega church experience where we like meet each other all the time, but we keep contact, and we ask each other questions about the faith, about certain current events, that sort of thing. And sometimes I think it's just one conversation away. I think God really wants to place those kinds of people in your life. And the cool thing about Shane too is that he has a very particular flavor of personality that really is blunt in the things that matter. Like I remember we've had conversations before, and sometimes this is something that I struggle with in my personal life, is that I have a sort of a potty mouth. And Shane was one of the first people that ever told me, like, hey, you should probably, that's like unbecoming of a Catholic gentleman. And like, that's, think of what it took to actually have that sort of conversation. That's crazy. That's like something that I didn't expect from.
Well, dang, Rudy, I'd like to apologize for that one text I sent earlier this morning on the motu proprio then.
Oh, yeah, Jordan, I was scandalous. Just kidding. No, it was, look, we're all going through something right now. I think, and I could be wrong, I think generally speaking, we should probably not cuss as much, but especially not in public.
Not in public, not around ladies.
Not around ladies, as Charles has mentioned before.
Yes.
But yeah, oftentimes it's just a conversation away.
Yeah, and what's funny is, again, it's like community doesn't, I mean, there is like the encompassing Catholic community of believers, right? Community of the saints, that sort of thing. There's a parish, which should have a particular sort of beat and feel you could feel about it. You can feel in a good parish, and this is maybe something for those of our listeners who maybe attend the Novus Ordo, because I know that sometimes it can be really hit or miss on demographics, obviously, as the church is shrinking and the Novus Ordo is hemorrhaging. If you're feeling like you're not being fed and that you're not finding people in your own age range, go traditional. I guarantee you, because it's not just young adults. I mean, there's a lot of them, but it's also young families, which is the demographic you're literally about to enter. and one that I'm about to enter. I mean, we entered it by our marriage technically, but really to see that with children, that's going to be surreal.
Yeah.
There's the old folks. Some of them in our parish communities have been the ones who've been fighting for the traditional Latin Mass since the old days. And those guys have some stories. Oh my gosh.
This woman Nancy that I've mentioned in the podcast before, who passed away, please pray for her, for the repose of her soul. She was one of those old people that stuck around through the changes, and she had crazy stories to tell. I mean, that might be an interesting opportunity for you to explore in your parish.
Right. And again, it's like inside the sense of community, it's not just restricted, of course, to your demographic. What's really nice about the Catholic faith and about a good parish life is you see those babies who've just been baptized and are beginning their life of faith, and you see those people who are closer to God willing, seeing our Lord in paradise. So that spread is important, and realizing that we're all oriented towards the same goal. It's a very beautiful thing to see. And I appreciate the fact that out of our cadre of a lot of wonderful young adults, we have a smaller cadre that's really been able to thrive even across states, because obviously I'm here in Colorado. I have to be very careful. I'm going to promise you and Ashley right now that you guys are our premier marriage friends, that we can't replace you even here. So, man. Well, I think that's perfect. And I hope, thank you everybody for listening. Thank you for all of you who have been our Patreon subscribers. We really couldn't do this without you. We are very, very grateful to your prayers and your support, and really helping us kind of get our podcast up and running, getting it into a good enough place that's worthy of your support. This world is crazy, as you all know, obviously. And so we understand that there is a lot of pulls at you. So the fact that you guys are able to really sit there and pull through for us is much appreciated. And may God really genuinely reward you, and may He keep you for these kind of endeavors. For Chad Monarchist, of course, you are allowed to suggest a topic. So if you would like to, go ahead and hit us up on Patreon, on YouTube, wherever it is. Instagram's a really popular place. We've been interacting with a lot of people on Instagram lately. They really like that Lefebvre told you so meme today, Rudy. So there's been a lot of Lefebvre ones today, huh? So
yeah, he's really been vindicated. But also, we'll talk about it when we get to that episode.
We'll talk about that one will be nice, and we'll open to the public. But
we're letting it marinate a little bit, because I think we've just been like shotgun blasted to the face.
Yeah, to the face.
With like rock salt, and we're just still trying to figure out like what the practical implications of this are going to be. So, right.
Oh Lord. Oh,
we really know what that looks like.
I'm reminded of something. I'm reminded that God is the bridegroom, that Jesus is the bridegroom, and the church is the bride, and that those who sit on the throne of St. Peter are just stewards. And even when they don't act that way, doesn't mean that they're suddenly not stewards anymore. So this is going to be a crazy time to live in. I actually had a joke, unfortunately. It came from John Calvin, of all people, because John Calvin has a quote. I know, right? I quoted two reformers today. I quoted Martin Luther's, "If you're going to sin, sin boldly." And John Calvin's today, I was like, wow, all I can think of is, "I did not leave Rome. Rome left me."
Cringe moment.
I know. Listen, even a heretic is right twice a day.
But know that you guys are in our prayers. We pray for you.
Yeah.
And like Jordan says, we're very thankful for this apostolate. We love to share the faith with you, and in a less cringy sort of way, we really are kind of all in this together. You know, us trads now even more.
Yeah.
Because we're kind of being pushed underground in a sense. But it's really amazing to share all of this stuff with you, and to learn as we go. And yeah, this is a wonderful community.
Yeah, that's so funny. I was literally about to say that this has formed its own community, and you and we both started this because we know that like the Lord pulled us in the Latin Mass, and that's completely reinvigorated. That has become the source of some of both of our lives, become the source in some of our marriages, our family life, our policy, everything. And so it's really exciting that we found people to also share that with so fervently. And so thank you again to everybody who supports us and who likes this. Keep commenting, and subscribing. You guys are in our prayers certainly fervently. And we will definitely see you on the next one. God bless you, and may I keep you. Adios.